Welcome everyone to Artist Talk.
Thank you, Alejandro, and I just wanted to thank Lothar for accepting our invitation. I
Glad to
know
be
that
here.
you've been, here several times in Colombia. And how you really got into photography as a young kid, and then analyzing photography. And I think it's important in this talk because you are a teacher. Why did you notice something sort of like always constant in the photographies of Henri Cartier-Bresson, correct?
Yeah, he had a big influence on me.
And then you excuse me to interrupt you. And then you sent him a letter, to him.
Yes.
And to surprise, he wrote you back. Could you please tell us about your influence in photography and tell us about your background?
It's so great that you remember this. I told you the story. Yes, I sent him, it was in the 90s, I think, early 90s. I'm not sure. I sent him a letter asking him first for forgiveness, to really write to him as a normal human being, because I adored him as my God. And I loved his decisive moment. I loved his creative use of black and white photography. And there was also some humor in his pictures. And other people said, yes, he had a lot of humor. And so I asked him, forgive me that I asked, but did you realize that when you have people or even animals like ducks in a pond, that you have them always or most of the time in pairs? So they seem to interact in pairs. You have conversations going on multiple levels, but the people in pairs. And he wrote back and said, I was never good in math. I didn't count, but what did he say? He said, I'm a storyteller. I'm telling you about people that are telling stories. So on a multiple level, but he said, but I can't count, throw that idea out.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
So it was not about counting, it was not about construction. It was about feeling the sense of the moment, and this is what he became so famous for.
That's great. Now, Lothar, how did you start photography? Your father gave you a camera, and then you got all connected?
That was even before that. I was interested in technical stuff, and this optical thing, looking into an old box like the old Brownie, you look from above through a lens, and then there is a mirror, and you see then the scenery in front of you, but side reversed because of the mirror and the reflections that are created in this optical instrument. And I played with them a lot. My father then got himself a Folklander camera, one of the early DSL cameras, with the flipping mirror. And he invested like a month and a half worth of earnings into this camera. I remember he spoke with my mother if they could afford that. So when it was time that I really showed severe interest, he gave me an Aqua point and shoot camera just to see how I would do. And I loved this camera. I was the family photographer since, and I took over. My father, of course, was still the photographer in the family.
You have a different types of bodies of work, and one that called our attention was these very classic places which are sort of disappearing. And we'll, as we talk on the recording, we'll show some of these images of like places where, these traditional restaurants where they sell hamburgers, but they are very Art Deco. And you have done some research on that among your body of work.
Okay, so this is Burkhard Arnold. He is a gallerist in Cologne, and he saw my American temples, that I called these buildings, at PhotoFest Houston in 2010. And here is a kind of overview, a grid of 16 places that I all shot at midnight with new moon, so no disturbing lights interfering with these pictures. And there are light lanterns models on their own. I have a couple of pictures that I get closer to, like this one, the White Castle, which I refer to in some text, you know, that in my pictures you do not see any visitors anymore, maybe one really late guy, but the only movement is like the flag in the wind, which is very typical for this diner movement. They also have the American flag out and upright, although these burgers are horrible. I would not suggest to eat them, but it doesn't matter. The picture is became iconic. And even another one I want to show, the fish market. It's not really a diner, but it fits in this series, or Arby's, just like a model you created yourself out from paper. And Dunkin' Donut, not really a diner, but a fast food place, which are replacing the old diner ideas. And I got this idea riding the bus from New York, where this Empire Diner is, along Route 9 towards Lakewood, where Linda's parents' house is, and we still live there. And along this nightly ride on the bus, there is black landscape, and then once in a while you have one of these light temples showing up. I mean, over the last 10 years, we have a couple of more malls along this road, so it's not as dark anymore as it was. So it's kind of preserving a feel that is disappearing at the moment. Yes, even this diner is no longer a diner. It's an extension of the bar next door. It's now an after-work, high-end, high-price liquor bar. And they don't call it Empire Diner anymore. And a lot of this golden reflecting thing is missing now. This statue is missing. But the building itself is still there. But it's sad to look at it at this moment. So, but then when I had the show in Cologne, I already realized time was moving on. And yeah, here's my favorite diner. That is a picture that got a couple of prizes and was rewarded by the Lucy's, you know, the International Photography Award. But yes, it might have been a preparation to my last work I'm working on without knowing it at that time. Of course, I realize you discover yourself and your language through photography, you know? Your pictures telling you who you are. It's Medellin seen through the eyes of a German.
I think it was, I mean, with all the German philosophical background, I think it was very interesting. And I think, you know, we went to several of these family houses too. And
yes.
I remember doing roller coastering on some of these buses coming down.
Yeah.
It was but just your eye was very exquisite. And that was, that exhibition, Alejandro, you know, traveled to different sites in Medellin, and that was in Moravia. So you were always with that camera going all over, you know.
Yeah. Colombians, they can be as poor as they can, but they always have a dream to make it. Not, you know, from the left side, Moravia, which is now cleaned up, to Hollywood, which is just, you know, a cliche. But when I was there, you had a modern style shopping center that I took pictures in just to show the difference. But then she is shopping, but not in the shopping center. This is the complete opposite. And then you have this nun, definitely not a danger to the people, but she has to use these fences, these bars, because I think even small business have to protect themselves in Colombia. And you know, this is where the Colombians coming from. They're selling the minutes on the cell phone. This guy is taking apart bigger boxes and just sells little snacks. I remember when they took the chewing gum packages apart and sold them by the stripe, just to make something out of it. And when you see these opposites, now here a former prison building, really nicely made up as a like a boutique, combination of boutiques and coffee stores in it, which is really representing the two sides. You know, where you're coming from and where you want to go. And I hope without losing the past, because the past says so much more. And this is what I was going to show and explore more. You know, this community, how could you find a community like this in a high rise replacing Moravia? You know, it's you have to combine, you have to find a compromise, something that combines both parts of the world you're living in. You know, taking care of each other. Even if you say, I wouldn't like my daughter to live like this, but it still expresses such deep humanity in her gesture and knowing she's living here in this Dodge. You know what I'm showing you here?
That it's by our
This-
neighborhood. Oh, that's yes.
No.
Oh,
Yes.
we are
Okay.
going.
Okay.
Yes,
Just
that's
listen to the story. So when
Yes, go ahead.
when I had this show of in your center in 2011, and I was proud of it, but I thought something is still missing. Although you saw a lot of it, and thanks for describing me using my own pictures. I said I have to come back and I want to dig deeper. And I learned about La Violencia in the 50s and the Civil War that was kind of brewing through more than a generation. I said, I want to focus more on this story as part of how can we heal from a disaster like this. And the typical German behind is I had to deal with my parents and grandparents coming out of the Third Reich. My parents were in a easy position because they were born late enough not to be involved in any war fights and stuff. My father just turned 16 when the war ended, so they tried to get him into the army, and he was hiding in his grandparents' attic, and 2 weeks later the war was over. So, but as a German, I usually say I'm not responsible, but I'm not guilty, but I'm responsible in a meaning that I have to give answers. Responsible has the word response in it. So I have to answer to questions. How could this happen? And this creates, this hunger of social engagement and almost not really, activism, you could call it. I need to tell the world something. So that would have been the alternative, I guess. That was, but of course not a long trip. But on the way, we found this. So traveling on a bus.
We waited 4 hours waiting for the express ride to San
Yes.
Carlos,
Yeah.
and it showed up like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
2 things I just realized. You are saying in English, you're riding on a bus, not in a bus. They took this literally. So that was the trip 2014, and then a second one 2015 that I see kind of in a combined fashion, because it came out of the same spirit with Don Carlos having done research on the surroundings of San Carlos. And interestingly enough, that is Don Carlos helping me in San Carlos. We drove to San Carlos, we went on the street, and I started shooting people. And it was now my goal to just make portraits of people in their environment, or maybe in connection with the murders of family members that they witnessed or had to suffer through. So I don't remember his name. Don Carlos knew him, and we were talking, and I was taking pictures and getting ready for the story that wanted to come out of me. And that we were at Pastora. We wrote a little thing. You had one part too. So this is what I wrote. So peace is a difficult way, but with no alternative.
Yes.
And that is absolutely true. And here she is in her center,
privilege.
Like across the street from the hotel where we stayed, and she documented the stories and the search for victims. She discovered mass graves. I think she found her daughter in a mass grave, and she became a great leader for people who wanted to guide us into a better future, I would say. Samuel Hernandez, he told us his story, and while Daniel was videographing him, I took pictures of him, and this was sitting in front of his house with his dog. Here we have Giovanni Ciro. He is a gold washer. His father was murdered right in front of his house, and it turned out by a mistaken identity. It was not his father they wanted to kill, but they found it out later, so it was done. This is so cruel. And here he is with his wife or girlfriend. They were not together at the time of the murder, I think. So I chose the first picture for the series. You will see he, as I said, was washing gold. So I tried with every person to find a little story that could go with it. But at the end, what came out of it was just pictures of these people with their stories. This one in between is the results of a photo workshop that I did with young, not so young kids in San Carlos.
San Carlos, yeah.
In San Carlos, this is all San Carlos, and we did this show then at the library, where we also met a couple of times before we went out, and I gave them some homework to do. And here is some results of my students' work. And then here is coming the story of Pastora and all the other ones that I will address later. But this is how it looked. We called it Testimonio de Resiliencia, the resilience, Colombian resilience. And everybody has their little story here under it written. Here the story is missing, I don't know why. But this was the whole story of 12 pictures that I put together. Here is part of the photo group with their little document that they participated in it.
Mm-hmm. They are the students, the participants.
And exactly, the students, the participants of the workshop that I did. And then we met for the opening reception, and then Elaine Ling, who was there in 2015, took this picture of me. She said, you know, with your hat, you have to go next to Octavio. And I said, okay, I can do that. And she always said, yeah, but remember, this was my picture, my idea. And that's why I'm mentioning Elaine Ling. We did not only pictures, we talked here at this talk. It was not so much about the pictures I took, it was about memory, because you have to work on it. You have to find answers to the questions. You are responsible, even as young people in the audience.
You came here in a moment where we were discussing in conversations of our next peace agreement with Das FARC and these groups.
Yes. In Colombia, there was a willingness to use violence to solve problems that should have been solved otherwise, but for some reason it was not possible. And I'm not the person to judge because of my own past, you know, and my people's past. And then here this is now the final stage of this project. You might have seen it online. I take the text very, very big, because in Pereira, even if these politicians had to walk by the pictures, they might not have read the text. Maybe they wouldn't have bothered to read the testimonies. So I want these testimonies really big, jumping into your eye, that you can't say, I didn't know, I was distracted, whatever it is. This face and this story belong together and you can't take it apart. And by the way, they all were encouraged, courageous enough to put their names out. You know, they did not fear retaliation, or they said, I don't care anymore. I'm standing here with my message to the world, and I just tried to be their, you know, broadcasting part of it.
Very profound.
And you have here Pablo, who was at the city council. He played the music. Yeah, here the music, the violin, the violins, the kids playing the violins. He was a radio talk host. He fled San Carlos and came back. They're still living now in Medellin, and he is back to San Carlos. I don't know what happened.
Amazing that he, even if he returned to San Carlos and lost a lot of the property, he just wants to live in his town, and there are no desires of vengeance. It's amazing, the testimony of resilience, of forgiveness of these people.
And when you see his wife and daughter still live in Medellin, so as a somewhat safer place, but he wanted to move on. He has something to say. So, and in this place he wants to say something. Here, a fisherman. Of course, you can't fish in Medellin. You are related to the country, and he is a country boy. He is a fisherman here, and he was affected by the hydroelectric companies. And they didn't have, as he said, he didn't have any problems with the paramilitaries, but they had to sell to the hydroelectric. So he is a victim of this kind of, I don't even know how to describe this. This company really going over dead people.
Yeah.
Here. He tells his story that his father in 1998 was murdered. That's now 23 years ago. They left San Carlos, but he came back with his wife. But the rest of the family is still in Medellin. We have a contractor here. He joined a group of fishermen. It's about control of the river. That's his story. Mm-hmm. he this
Somehow, if you're making a prediction on something, there is this thing that San Carlos is very rich in water resources, and all this war, all this violence, it has also something to do with it. It has something to do with the relation or the control of that resources of water in that territory. And
Yeah.
I think this is going to be the next war in the world. You know, it's going to be the big issue now.
Yeah, that could be. That's it. It's this danger is still looming there, and so far, what usually happens, but we don't really want to accept this, is that these big companies win, and the people get displaced. They lose their roots. They lose their traditions, and once this is done, you know, a society is devastated after that. And cities like New York only survives if we kill the environment around it. And this is tragic, but I don't have the solution for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all these thoughts about, like all the problematics that we might have as a human, as a nation.
You work through photography, give answers, and I think that you know, the way you have expressed these ideas visually, they are giving us answers and signals of hope. So maybe next program will be about your philosophical book.
Oh, yeah, right.
But anyways, thank you so much, Lothar.
You are so welcome. I'm glad we came together again, and you know, I think this Colombian chapter is not completely closed yet. I would like to see a visual afterward, like you know, 10 years later, you know, when you revisit a place and you say, I had a vision, but I was showing this, and I'm actually curious what happened over the last 7 years. Okay, thank you so much.